My name is Rose, and I'm a 34-year-old office worker. My husband, David, and I have been married for 10 years. We had a child soon after we got married, so our daughter will be turning 10 this year. It's not that I don't have any complaints about my marriage, but overall, I'm happy because my daughter has grown into such a lovely and wonderful girl. However, my main dissatisfaction with my husband revolves around money. David has a habit of spending a significant amount on his hobbies. It's not excessive, but still quite a lot. I constantly insist that he brings in just enough money to cover the household expenses, like utilities and groceries. But because he only provides the bare minimum, I've had to cut back on other costs. On top of that, I've been paying the rent, covering our daughter's school tuition, and saving for her future education with my own salary. Then, there's the issue of housework. My husband does none of it. I wanted to split the responsibilities since we both work, but he'd always say, if I do it, it'll just take longer, using that as an excuse to avoid doing anything. So, it became the norm for me to handle everything. Even after our daughter was born, he hardly participated in raising her, claiming he was afraid he might hurt her or cause an accident. As I reflected on our situation, I realized I was quite dissatisfied with David. But after 10 years of marriage and with our child growing up, I knew that divorcing while our daughter was about to enter puberty wasn't a good idea. I convinced myself that no marriage is perfect and tried to accept the distance that had grown between us. However, something happened recently that changed my mind about divorce completely. It all started with my sister-in-law. One day, she showed up at my house unexpectedly. "Rose, I'm sorry, but I need to hide here for a while." "What's going on?" I asked. "I had a bit of trouble with my husband. Let me stay here for a while." "What? Did something happen with Tom?" "No, it's just, she replied, avoiding my questions and trying to change the subject. I wasn't convinced, so I waited for David to come home. When David returned around 8 p.m., after putting our daughter to bed, we sat down with my sister-in-law to talk. "Sis, what happened?" David asked. "Well, Tom suddenly snapped and told me he wants a divorce," she said. "What?" I was surprised. Tom had always seemed like a sincere and calm man, not the type to get angry and ask for a divorce out of the blue. "Why did Tom get angry?" I pressed. "Why are you asking me that?" she snapped back. "Because I don't think Tom is the kind of person who would get angry without a reason," I replied. "That's what I want to know." I couldn't help but notice that my sister-in-law seemed panicked, but if Tom was asking for a divorce, there must have been something she did to make him that angry. "Rose, why are you defending Tom so much? Are you having an affair with him?" she suddenly accused. "Of course not," I responded, shocked. I wonder," she said suspiciously. My husband then laughed and said, "No, sis, that's not possible. She doesn't even have the time for that. Besides, Rose always leaves her phone on the table." Though he was defending me, his remark irritated me. I was constantly juggling work, housework, and raising our child. I barely had time to make dinner after work, let alone look at my phone. In the end, my sister-in-law stuck to her claim, "I don't know why he's angry." We couldn't get a clear answer, so my husband and I decided to talk to Tom directly. Later, when Tom came over, my sister-in-law conveniently left, saying it would be awkward to see him. As soon as Tom arrived, he politely apologized to us. "I'm really sorry for causing you both so much trouble." Tom was a sincere man, and it seemed out of character for him to suddenly get angry. "Why did you ask my sister for a divorce? You've only been married for a year. Isn't that a bit harsh? There must be a reason, right?" I asked. "She spent all of my money without permission," Tom replied. "Really? How much money did you have saved?" I asked. $50,000. My husband and I exchanged surprised looks. $50,000 in just 1 year. That was about $4,100 a month. And Tom had already been giving her enough from his income to cover all living expenses. So, my sister-in-law had been spending it all on her own entertainment. Naturally, Tom was furious. Who wouldn't be? I certainly would be if I were in his shoes. Staying married to someone with such reckless spending habits would be tough. Is something wrong? My husband asked when he noticed my pause. Oh, nothing. It's just, well, you have a bad spending habit too, I admitted, realizing how similar he and his sister were. If she doesn't pay back the $50,000, divorce her. You don't have kids, so it seems like a reasonable decision, my husband added. As I nodded in agreement, my husband suddenly interrupted with, okay, I'll make sure my sister pays you back. Why was he so confident about that? I didn't understand where his certainty came from, but Tom simply replied, I'd appreciate that. With that, the conversation ended, and I decided to keep an eye on the situation. Later, when my sister-in-law returned, she immediately asked, what did Tom say? Tom said you spent all of his $50,000 in savings, I answered. Oh, I used it for living expenses. I tried to explain, but he just didn't get it, she defended herself. But Tom mentioned he had a separate account specifically for living expenses, I countered. Ugh, you don't know anything, so just shut up, she snapped at me, her harsh tone cutting through the air. She had always had a habit of belittling me, but this time it was clear that Tom should divorce her. Anyway, he said he'd forgive you if you paid him back the $50,000. How can I pay back that much? I'm a housewife, my sister-in-law exclaimed. If you can't pay it back, you shouldn't have spent his money, I replied firmly. Well, sis, relax. We have money, right, Rose? My husband interjected. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. She's got $100,000 in her savings, so don't worry, sis, he continued, directing his words at his sister. So, Rose, we're counting on you. Huh? I stammered, shocked. My sister-in-law looked at me with a gleam in her eye. What the hell, Rose? How come you didn't tell me that sooner, she demanded. Wait a minute, I said, trying to process everything. First of all, how did you even know about my savings, David? I found it when I went to your parents' house, he admitted. It was in the second drawer of the closet in your room. You looked through my things without my permission. I asked, incredulous. We're married, for God's sake, he said dismissively. Anyway, your sister-in-law is in trouble, so just give us your savings. No way. I shot back. That money is for our daughter. I'm not giving it to you. You have $100,000, so just give her $50,000, he insisted. If that's the case, why don't you pay her instead? I countered. Whoever has it should pay, my husband argued. Rose, please help me. I'm in the middle of a divorce, my sister-in-law pleaded. That's none of my business. It's your fault, I said coldly. That's terrible. You don't love your family, she accused. If love means giving you money, then I don't need that kind of family love, I replied. If you don't pay me $50,000, I'll divorce you, David threatened, pulling out divorce papers from a drawer. Oh, so you've been preparing for this? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. I had them ready just in case, he said nonchalantly. You have a lot of nerve trying to get your way, you know that. That's exactly what I want to say to you, I shot back. He filled out the form and said, I'm serious. We can get divorced anytime. To my surprise, my sister-in-law grinned and said, well, I'll be one of your witnesses. She then signed her name on the form. So, you can either pay me $50,000, or you can get divorced. I couldn't believe their audacity, but I decided to play along for the moment. All right, I said, pretending to give in. The next day, I brought some people to the house, my in-laws and Tom. Why are you here, Tom? And why are Mom and Dad here? My husband asked, visibly uncomfortable. I heard the story, his father said. David, don't embarrass yourself. Rose, I'm really sorry for my stupid son and daughter, my mother-in-law added, shaking her head. Tom, we owe you an apology too, she continued, addressing him. Why are you two apologizing? My sister-in-law snapped, confused. You shut up, their father said sternly. We went through your room and found tons of brown bags and jewelry. How did you find out? She stammered, clearly panicking. Tom asked me to investigate, and I did, her father explained. You've had a habit of hiding things since you were a child. Tom looked at her sadly and said, I can't stay married to you anymore, especially after you lied about using the money for living expenses. I want you to pay me back the $50,000 and divorce me, Tom demanded. Oh no, my sister-in-law whispered, realizing the gravity of the situation. And David, you're getting a divorce too, Tom continued. What? David looked shocked. Rose has already filled out the divorce papers, and I signed as a witness. We've just submitted them together, Tom explained calmly. What? I won't allow that. David exclaimed. You won't allow it? Tom shot back. What are you talking about? You threatened her with divorce and tried to make her, who had nothing to do with your sister's mess, take over the debt. That's disgusting. Rose is my wife. David protested. She's not your property, Tom replied sharply. She wasn't born into your family, she's a person, and you should have more respect and care for her. David couldn't argue with that. He hung his head, speechless. My sister-in-law, equally defeated, stood there in shock. Thanks to my in-laws, the conversation ended smoothly, and Tom and I were able to finalize our divorces without any problems. My sister-in-law ended up selling as many of her luxury items as she could, managing to repay about $20,000. The rest was covered by my in-laws, and she was put under their supervision to work from morning till night to pay them back. As for David, I arranged for him to pay child support. I heard that he moved into a cheaper apartment after struggling to cover his rent, living expenses, and child support with his salary. Despite living more modestly, his habit of wasting money persisted, leaving him constantly broke and with no savings. While he continues to pay child support, I'm not worried about him. If he keeps living like that, he'll likely be single for a long time. Meanwhile, I've moved back to my parents' home, working hard while they help take care of our daughter. My goal now is to ensure that my daughter can pursue whatever dreams she has, whenever she wants, and as much as she desires. So, I'll keep saving and nurturing her future.
The conference room buzzed with chatter as I glanced at my phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from Tyler. I stepped out into the hallway, expecting the usual small talk. How's the trip? When will you be home? Instead, Tyler's voice came through cold and smug. I'm divorcing you, he said, his tone almost triumphant. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse, it was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as his words sunk in. You sold the apartment? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Yeah, he said with a dry laugh. Nicole and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway. Nicole. The name stung, though I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Tyler's late nights, his sudden work trips, and the mounting distance between us all pointed to a third party. But to hear him speak her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. "Sounds good," I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving him the satisfaction of hearing me crack. "My name is Amelia, and up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a man I could trust. Tyler and I had been together for 6 years, and while things hadn't always been perfect, I'd believed in our partnership. We'd worked hard to buy our apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it. It wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of everything we'd built together. Or at least that's what I'd thought. Looking back, there had been signs, small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Tyler's dismissive attitude whenever I asked about finances, his tendency to brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I'd always assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing he could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Tyler thought he'd won. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd worked so hard for, and walk away scot-free. But there was one crucial detail he didn't know. The apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Tyler had agreed to without much thought because it meant a lower interest rate. He'd never bothered to ask about the details or read the paperwork he'd signed. His carelessness was going to be his undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Tyler wanted a fight? Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Chloe, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in painstaking detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. "He sold the apartment?" she repeated, incredulous. "Does he even realize that he can't do that without your consent?" "Apparently not," I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. "He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Nicole." Chloe laughed dryly. "Well, he's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if he's taken any money from the buyer, he's on the hook for fraud." The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. "What do we need to do?" I asked. "First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal," Chloe said. "Then, we'll draft a formal letter for Tyler, outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take him to court." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Tyler thought he'd outsmarted me, that he'd left me powerless and scrambling. But in reality, he'd just set himself up for the ultimate humiliation. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Tyler's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Tyler, ready to dismantle his lies, and ready to start a new chapter without him. This wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Tyler's arrogance was astounding. He hadn't even tried to hide his betrayal, as if I was just another obstacle to bulldoze on his path to freedom. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Tyler thought I was powerless, but he didn't realize I'd been playing the long game without even knowing it. As the plane touched down, my first call was to Chloe. "I'm back," I said as I hauled my suitcase off the luggage carousel. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked, to say the least, and not too happy with Tyler. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. "And Tyler?" I asked. "I sent the formal letter to his email this morning," she said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be furious." Good, I thought. Let him stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Tyler's things were still there, his jackets draped over the chair, his shoes carelessly tossed by the door, but the place felt different, like the energy had shifted. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing that the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Tyler came storming in that evening, his face red with anger and his phone clutched in his hand. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving the letter Chloe had sent. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine." "No, Tyler," I said calmly, crossing my arms. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze, his face a mixture of confusion and rage. "What are you talking about?" I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for him to see. "After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression twisted into a sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart." I stared at him, unblinking. "The sale is already void, Tyler. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money. Oh, and speaking of money..." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "If you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble." Tyler's confidence wavered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice steady. "You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Tyler? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." He started pacing, his frustration mounting. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here?" I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few days, Tyler's anger turned into desperation. He called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Chloe worked behind the scenes to ensure that every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Tyler for wasting their time and money, and Chloe drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. "You're in a good position, Amelia," she told me during one of our meetings. "Tyler has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess." Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I'd allowed Tyler to control my life. For years, I'd ignored his dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now, I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Lauren, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Tyler's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's he taking all this?" she asked, holding up one of his gaudy ties with a smirk. "Not well," I said, laughing despite myself. "He's still convinced he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging." "Good," she said, tossing the tie into the box. "He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Tyler took credit for everything. But now, I had people in my corner, and that made all the difference. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Tyler brought Nicole to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table reviewing some paperwork when they walked in like they owned the place. Nicole looked around with a smug smile, her arm looped through Tyler's. "So, this is where we're staying?" she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "No," I said firmly. "This is where Tyler was staying. You, Nicole, won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered and she glanced at Tyler, who looked equally stunned. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," I said, gesturing to the apartment around me, "is my home. Not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to shack up in after stabbing me in the back. Nicole's expression turned icy, but she said nothing. Tyler, on the other hand, looked like he was about to explode. "You can't do this!" he shouted. "You're being unreasonable!" I met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Tyler. What's unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home, walk away with the money, and expect me to just roll over. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges for now." Tyler stood in the doorway, his face red with frustration, while Nicole crossed her arms, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous, Amelia," he said, his voice laced with desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, my voice calm but unwavering. "This is my home, Tyler. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know that. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, just like you always do. So no, this isn't your home anymore." Nicole glanced at Tyler, her perfectly manicured hand tightening around her purse strap. "Wait, what's she talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. "You said this was your apartment, that you sold it." He flinched, trying to wave her off. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I said, stepping closer. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. That sale is void, Tyler. And as of right now, you don't have a leg to stand on." Nicole's composure cracked. "You mean the money you told me you had—" She stopped mid-sentence, her voice rising. "Oh my God, did you lie about that too?" "Nicole, let me explain," Tyler said quickly, holding his hands up. But she wasn't having it. "No," I said, cutting him off. "Let me explain. Tyler tried to sell the apartment behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had the deed transferred to my name months ago. So not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could." Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Fraud?" she whispered, taking a step away from him. "Are you serious?" "Yes, fraud," I said, crossing my arms, "and I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day." Tyler's facade finally cracked. "You can't do this, Amelia," he said, his voice pleading now. "We've been together for 6 years. You can't just throw me out." "You threw me out the moment you made that phone call," I said, my voice hardening. "You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Tyler. You tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and act like you're the victim." Nicole took another step back, her eyes darting between us. "This is insane," she muttered, clutching her purse tighter. "You didn't tell me any of this, Tyler. You said you had everything handled." He turned to her, desperation written all over his face. "Nicole, I can fix this. I just need—" She cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't, just don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess." Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving him standing there, stunned. I couldn't help but smile as the door clicked shut behind her. "Looks like you're on your own," I said, turning back to Tyler. "Now, let's talk about what happens next." He slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Amelia, please. I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to do this." "You're right," I said, grabbing a folder from the kitchen counter and setting it on the coffee table in front of him. "I don't have to do this, but I'm going to. This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drafted it, and I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on." He stared at the folder, his face pale. "You really hate me that much?" "Hate you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Tyler, I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything. Someone who loved you, a home we built together. And you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego." I stood, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. "I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'm giving you any grace." He opened his mouth to argue but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking toward the door. "And don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's already handling everything, and the next time you cross a line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it." As I opened the door, Tyler slowly stood, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at me as he walked out, his footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the life we could have had if he'd been the man I thought he was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with the new key I'd had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially not Tyler, would take it away from me again. The silence in the apartment after Tyler left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with his presence, his entitlement, or his lies. It was just me, the home I'd built, and the quiet realization that I had won, not just against him, but against every doubt I'd ever had about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his things had been. His oversized gaming chair, the framed jerseys that had cluttered the walls, and the gaudy coffee table he'd insisted on keeping were all gone. The apartment looked cleaner, brighter, like it was mine again. Lauren came by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Is he really gone?" she asked, plopping down on the couch with a dramatic sigh. "Gone and not coming back," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave him until the end of the day to pack his things. He didn't argue. Lauren raised her glass. "To fresh starts and well-deserved victories." I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lifting. To never letting someone walk all over me again. Over the next few days, I began to reclaim the apartment piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, moved my favorite artwork into the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about turning the apartment into a reflection of who I was, not the person Tyler had tried to make me. Chloe called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice filled with the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. "The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer decided not to pursue them," she explained. "But the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Tyler signs, you'll be officially free." Hearing the word free made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about everything I'd been carrying for years. The resentment, the self-doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that didn't value me. It was all finally being lifted. Tyler tried to reach out a few times. His messages ranged from half-hearted apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt me into reconciling. "I made a mistake," one read. "Can't we at least talk about this?" Another was more desperate. "You're going to ruin me, Amelia. Is that what you want?" I didn't reply. For once, I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. He'd made his choices, and now he was dealing with the consequences. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like a completely new space, warm, inviting, and entirely mine. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the city lights twinkling outside the window, I thought about everything that had happened. Tyler's betrayal had been a shock, but it had also been a wake-up call. For too long, I'd let myself believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for whatever scraps of respect and love he decided to throw my way. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my apartment, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was unrecognizable, not because of any drastic renovations, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected me, my tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Tyler's clutter and his overbearing presence made the home feel lighter, freer. The divorce was moving along smoothly. Chloe had handled everything with precision, ensuring Tyler had no room to argue or complicate the process. He signed the papers without much fuss, likely realizing that he had no leverage. There was no grand showdown, no emotional plea to work things out. just a cold, clean break that felt both bittersweet and deeply satisfying. One day, as I sorted through some old papers, I came across a photo of Tyler and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arms around each other, full of hope and promise. I stared at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There had been good times, moments when I truly believed we were building a life together. But those moments were gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I tucked the photo into an envelope and put it away in a drawer. It wasn't worth keeping out in the open, but I wasn't ready to throw it away either. It was a part of my past, but it didn't define me anymore. Lauren and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's not the single life," I said. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living under someone else's rules." We toasted to that, and as the night went on, I felt a growing sense of pride in myself. I'd faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at home, I started planning for the future. The apartment had become more than a refuge. It was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday, I'd move to a new place, one without any lingering shadows of my life with Tyler. Until then, I was determined to make the most of every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. As I curled up on the couch that night, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about how Tyler had laughed during that phone call, so certain that he'd won, and I couldn't help but smile. His arrogance had been his downfall, and my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I called the shots, one where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long time, I felt truly free.
I stood at the kitchen counter, chopping onions for my signature beef stew, when Josie burst through the front door. Her face was flushed, eyes wild with a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. I set down the knife, wiping my hands on my apron. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Josie paced the kitchen, her hands clenched into fists. "I saw Dad today. He was with Claudia." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, with Claudia?" "They were at the mall, holding hands. I saw them, kissing." Josie's voice cracked on the last word. The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Are you sure it was them?" Josie nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm positive, Mom. I'm so sorry." I took a deep breath, trying to process this bombshell. Steve and Claudia, my husband and my best friend? It couldn't be true. But Josie wouldn't lie about something like this. "Did they see you?" I asked, my mind racing. "No, I don't think so. I ran out of there as fast as I could." I pulled Josie into a hug, feeling her body shake with sobs. "It's okay, sweetie. We'll figure this out." Just then, the front door opened again. Jesse walked in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He took one look at us and froze. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. I released Josie and turned to face my son. "Jesse, we need to talk. All of us." We gathered around the kitchen table, the beef stew forgotten. I explained what Josie had seen, watching Jesse's face darken with each word. "I'll kill him," Jesse growled, his hands balling into fists. "No, you won't," I said firmly. "We need to handle this like adults." "But, Mom," Josie interjected, "what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "First, I need to talk to your father. We need to hear his side of the story." "His side?" Jesse scoffed. "What side could possibly justify cheating on you?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but I owe it to our family to at least hear him out before making any decisions." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us all freeze. Steve was home. "Kids, go to your rooms," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to talk to your father alone." Josie and Jesse exchanged worried glances, but did as I asked. As they climbed the stairs, I heard the front door open. "Laura?" Steve called out. Something smells good. I stood up, smoothing down my apron. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists at my sides. Steve walked into the kitchen, a smile on his face that quickly faded when he saw my expression. What's wrong? I looked at him, this man I'd loved for over 20 years, and felt my heart breaking. We need to talk, Steve. Josie saw you today, with Claudia. The color drained from his face. Laura, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. Can you explain why our daughter had to see her father kissing another woman? Can you explain why you'd betray me with my best friend? Steve's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. In that moment of silence, I heard the muffled sobs of Josie from upstairs and Jessie's attempts to comfort her. I took a step closer to Steve, my voice low and dangerous. You have one chance to tell me the truth, Steve. One chance to save this family. What's it going to be? As I stared into his eyes, searching for any sign of the man I married, I realized that no matter what he said next, nothing would ever be the same again. Our perfect little family was shattered, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. I couldn't sleep that night. Steve's weak explanations and half-hearted apologies echoed in my head. By morning, I was a mess of anger and hurt, determined to see the truth for myself. I drove to Claudia's house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. As I turned onto her street, my heart stopped. There was Steve's car, parked right in front of her house. I pulled over, my vision blurring with tears. How could he do this? How could they both betray me like this? My phone buzzed. It was Jessie. Mom, where are you? Are you okay? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. I'm fine, honey. I just needed to run an errand. You don't sound fine. I'm coming to get you. No, Jessie, But he had already hung up. I sat there, staring at Claudia's house, willing myself not to march up to the door and confront them both. 20 minutes later, Jessie's beat-up Corolla pulled up behind me. He got out and tapped on my window. I rolled it down, avoiding his eyes. How did you find me? Find my iPhone, he said, his voice tight. Mom, what are you doing here? I gestured weakly at Steve's car. Jessie's face darkened as he understood. Let's go home, he said, opening my door. You shouldn't be here. As I got out, the front door of Claudia's house opened. Steve stepped out, laughing at something behind him. When he turned and saw us, the laughter died on his lips. Laura? Jessie? He looked between us, confusion and guilt warring on his face. Jessie stepped forward, his fists clenched. How could you, Dad? How could you do this to Mom? Steve held up his hands. Son, it's complicated. You don't understand. I understand plenty, Jessie spat. I understand that you're a lying, cheating. Jessie, stop, I said, grabbing his arm. This isn't helping. Claudia appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Laura, I'm so sorry. We never meant for this to happen. I laughed bitterly. Never meant for what to happen, Claudia? For me to find out? For my children to see their father destroy our family? Steve took a step toward us. Laura, please, let's talk about this. Not here. Not like this. No, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. We're done talking, Steve. We're done with all of it. I turned to Jessie. Let's go home. As we drove away, Jessie glanced at me. Mom, what are we going to do? I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood blur past. I don't know, honey, but we'll figure it out together. When we got home, Josie was waiting on the porch. One look at our faces told her everything. It's true, isn't it? She asked, her voice small. Dad's really leaving us for her. I pulled both my children into a tight hug, feeling their bodies shake with silent sobs. I don't know what your father's going to do, I said. But I know that the three of us are going to be okay. We have each other, and that's what matters. We went inside, and I made us all some tea. As we sat around the kitchen table, I looked at my children's tear-stained faces and felt a fierce protectiveness wash over me. I want you both to listen to me, I said. What your father did was wrong. It's going to hurt for a long time, but we are not going to let this break us. We are stronger than that. Jessie nodded, his jaw set. What do you need us to do, Mom? I reached out and squeezed his hand. Just be yourselves. Focus on school, on your friends. I'll handle everything else. Josie wiped her eyes. But what about you, Mom? Who's going to take care of you? I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest despite everything. We'll take care of each other. That's what family does. As we sat there sipping our tea and making plans for the future, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. Our lives had been turned upside down, but we were still standing. and no matter what Steve or Claudia or anyone else threw at us, we would face it together. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the front door slamming. Steve was home. I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. I found him in the kitchen, slumped at the table, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot and weary. "Laura," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady despite the turmoil inside. "Yes, we do." Steve took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, I know that doesn't begin to cover it, but I am. What I did, it was unforgivable." "You're right," I said, my voice cold. "It was." He flinched at my tone. "I want to make this right. Tell me what I need to do." I laughed bitterly. "Make it right? Steve, you can't just fix this with an apology and some flowers. You destroyed our family." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "but I want to try. For the kids, if nothing else." I set my coffee cup down hard, liquid sloshing over the rim. "Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. You should have thought about them before you started sleeping with my best friend." Steve's face crumpled. "Laura, please. I made a mistake, a terrible, awful mistake. But I love you. I love our family. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this," I spat. He stood up, reaching for me. I stepped back out of his reach. "Don't touch me," I hissed. Steve's hand fell to his side. He looked defeated, lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "What do you want, Steve?" I asked, suddenly tired. "Why are you really here?" He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even after everything, I hadn't expected this. "A divorce?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Steve nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I think it's for the best, for all of us." I felt the room spinning. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "You want to leave me for her, for Claudia." "It's not like that," Steve protested weakly. "Then what is it like?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Explain it to me, Steve. Explain how you can throw away 20 years of marriage, 2 children, everything we've built together for what? A fling with a woman who wears too much perfume and maxes out her credit cards?" Steve's face hardened. "Don't talk about her like that. You don't know her." "And you do?" I laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. "Let me guess, she understands you in a way I never could. She makes you feel young again. Is that it?" "Stop it, Laura," Steve said, his voice low and dangerous. "No, you stop it," I shot back. "You don't get to waltz in here and demand a divorce like you're asking for a cup of sugar. You don't get to destroy our lives and then act like you're the victim." Just then, Josie appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Steve's expression softened. "Josie, honey, go back to your room. Your mom and I are just talking." "No," I said firmly. "She deserves to know. Your father wants a divorce, Josie. He's leaving us for Claudia." Josie's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, is that true?" Steve looked stricken. "Josie, it's complicated. I never meant to hurt anyone." "But you did," Josie said, her voice breaking. "You hurt all of us." She turned and ran upstairs. We heard her door slam shut. Steve moved to follow her, but I blocked his path. "Leave her alone. You've done enough damage." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Laura, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, take some time apart, anything but this." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "No, Steve, you wanted a divorce. You've got one. Now get out of my house." As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of grief and determination wash over me. Our life together was over, but I had 2 children who needed me. No matter what it took, I would protect them and give them the stability they deserved. Steve may have given up on our family, but I never would. I stood on Steve's parents' doorstep, my heart pounding. I'd always gotten along well with Martha and George, but this visit felt different, dangerous even. Still, I needed to try. For the kids' sake, if nothing else. Martha answered the door, her smile fading as she saw me. "Laura, what are you doing here?" I took a deep breath. "We need to talk, Martha, about Steve." "Oh," she hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. George was in the living room, watching golf. He muted the TV as I entered. "What's this about, Laura?" he asked, his voice gruff. I sat down, clasping my hands tightly in my lap. "Steve and I are getting a divorce. He's been having an affair with Claudia." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha's face paled, while George's reddened. "That can't be right," Martha said finally. "There must be some mistake." I shook my head. "I'm afraid not. Josie saw them together, and Steve admitted it to me himself." George leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And what did you do to drive him to this, Laura? I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. Excuse me, George, Martha exclaimed, but he waved her off. No, I want to know, he pressed. Steve's a good man. He wouldn't do this without reason. I felt anger bubbling up inside me. Without reason. There is no reason good enough to justify what he's done. Martha sat down beside me, her face a mask of concern. Laura, dear, maybe if you'd been more attentive to Steve's needs. My needs? I interrupted, incredulous. What about my needs? What about our children's needs? George scoffed. Don't bring the kids into this. They'll be fine. Kids are resilient. I stood up, my hands shaking. Resilient? Do you have any idea what this is doing to them? Josie cries herself to sleep every night. Jessie's barely speaking to anyone. Well, maybe if you hadn't turned them against their father, Martha began. I didn't turn anyone against Steve, I snapped. He did that all on his own when he decided to throw away our family for a fling with Claudia. George stood up, towering over me. Now listen here, young lady. I won't have you coming into our home and speaking ill of our son. I refused to back down. Your son destroyed our family. He's abandoning his children for a woman who cares more about her designer handbags than anyone else. Martha gasped. How dare you speak about Claudia that way? She's a lovely woman. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. You knew, I whispered, looking between them. You knew about the affair, didn't you? Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. How long? I demanded. How long have you known? George looked away. That's not important. It is to me, I shouted. How long have you been lying to my face, pretending everything was fine? Martha stood up, wringing her hands. Laura, please try to understand. Steve was unhappy. Claudia makes him happy. I felt like I was going to be sick. And what about me? What about my happiness? What about our children's happiness? Sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good, George said solemnly. I stared at them, these people I'd considered family for over 2 decades. The greater good? Is that what you call destroying a family? Martha reached out to touch my arm. I jerked away. Don't, I said, my voice cold. Don't you dare try to comfort me now. You're as much to blame for this as Steve is. I headed for the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I came here hoping for support, for some semblance of family. I see now that was a mistake. You're not my family. You never were. As I walked out, I heard Martha call after me, but I didn't turn back. My mind was racing, piecing together all the times Steve had visited his parents alone, all the knowing looks and hushed conversations. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'd come here looking for peace, for a way to salvage something from this mess. Instead, I'd found more betrayal, more pain. As I drove home, I made a decision. No more olive branches, no more attempts at reconciliation. From now on, I was fighting for myself and my children, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I was elbow-deep in soapy water, scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary when the front door slammed open. Steve stormed into the kitchen, his face a thundercloud of rage. You went to my parents, he shouted, not bothering with a greeting. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands, trying to stay calm. Yes, I did. How dare you? Steve's voice rose. You had no right to drag them into this. I felt my own anger rising to match his. No right? They're my children's grandparents. I thought they deserved to know what was happening to their family. Steve laughed bitterly. Family? Is that what you call this? You've turned everyone against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, Steve, I said, my voice steady. You did that all on your own when you decided to cheat on me with my best friend. He slammed his fist on the counter, making me flinch. Don't you dare bring Claudia into this. Why not? I shot back. She's as much a part of this mess as you are. Steve's face contorted with anger. This is exactly why I want a divorce. You're always playing the victim, never taking any responsibility for your part in this. I felt like I'd been slapped. My part? What part did I play in your decision to betray our marriage vows? You were never there for me, Steve shouted, always too busy with the kids, with your hobbies, with everything but me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was raising our children, Steve. Someone had to be there for them while you were working late nights and weekends. Don't act like you're the only one who sacrificed, he spat. I gave up my dreams to provide for this family. And that gives you the right to throw it all away? I asked, incredulous. Before Steve could respond, we heard a gasp from the doorway. Josie stood there, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. "Josie," Steve said, his voice softening. "Honey, I'm sorry. We didn't mean for you to hear that." Josie shook her head, backing away. "How could you say those things, Dad? How could you blame Mom for what you did?" Steve reached out to her, but she turned and ran upstairs. We heard her door slam shut. The fight seemed to drain out of Steve. He slumped against the counter, suddenly looking old and tired. "This is why I didn't want to involve the kids," he said quietly. I felt a surge of protective anger. "They're already involved, Steve. They're living this nightmare right along with us." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Can't we try to make this work? For their sake?" For a moment, I almost wavered. Then I remembered the look on Josie's face, the pain in Jesse's eyes when he found out about the affair. "No," I said firmly. "We can't. It's too late for that." Steve's face hardened. "Fine. If that's how you want it, we'll do this the hard way. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning." As he turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Steve," I called after him. He paused at the door, not turning around. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week," I said. "The kids and we need space to heal." Steve's shoulders slumped, but he nodded. Without another word, he left. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my mind racing. This was it. There was no going back now. We were really getting a divorce. I heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Jesse and Josie standing in the doorway, holding hands. Their faces were a mix of fear and determination. "Mom," Jesse said softly. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. "Now, we fight, for our family, for our future. It won't be easy, but we'll do it together." As I looked at my children's faces, I knew I had made the right decision. No matter what Steve or his parents or anyone else threw at us, we would face it as a team. And somehow, someway, we would come out stronger on the other side. The law office felt cold and impersonal as I sat across from my attorney, Sarah. She shuffled through a stack of papers, her face grim. "Laura, I won't sugarcoat this," she said. "Steve's playing hardball. He's going for full custody of the kids and wants to sell the house." My stomach dropped. "He can't do that, can he?" Sarah sighed. "He's claiming you're an unfit mother, citing your emotional instability since the separation." I felt the room spin. "Emotional instability? I'm not the one who threw away our marriage for an affair." "I know, Laura," Sarah said, her voice softening, "but we need to be prepared. This is going to be a tough fight." As I left the office, my phone buzzed. It was my new boss at the bakery. "Laura, I need you to come in. We're short-staffed." I glanced at my watch. Josie's parent-teacher conference was in an hour. "I can't. I have a commitment with my daughter." "Look," he said, his voice sharp. "I know you're going through a rough time, but I need reliable employees. If you can't make it, don't bother coming back." I felt tears pricking my eyes. "I'll be there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I called Josie, my heart heavy. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I can't make the conference. Work emergency." The silence on the other end was deafening. "It's fine," Josie finally said, her voice flat. "Dad said he'd go anyway." My blood ran cold. "Your father's going?" "Yeah," Josie said. "He called this morning, said he wanted to be more involved." I ended the call, my mind racing. Steve hadn't been to a school event in years. Why now? With a sinking feeling, I realized this was part of his strategy. Painting himself as the involved parent while I was too busy working to show up. The bakery was chaos when I arrived. I threw myself into the work, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of kneading dough and decorating cakes. But my mind kept wandering to Josie, to Steve sitting in that conference, charming her teachers. As I was closing up, my phone rang again. It was Jesse. "Mom," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Dad's here. He's packing up his stuff. And he's taking some of our things, too." I felt a surge of panic. "What? Jesse, don't let him take anything of yours or Josie's." "I'm trying, Mom," Jesse said, his voice cracking. "But he says as long as he's paying child support, he has a right to it. He took your recipe book, the one with Grandma's beef stew recipe." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. That book was my most prized possession, filled with generations of family recipes. "I'll be right there," I said, already running for my car. I broke every speed limit on the way home, my heart pounding. When I pulled into the driveway, Steve was loading boxes into his car. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, slamming my car door. Steve turned, his face a mask of cold determination. Taking what's rightfully mine, Laura. You can't keep everything. I marched up to him, fury coursing through my veins. Give me back my recipe book. Now. He smirked, holding it just out of reach. Oh, this old thing? I thought I'd give it to Claudia. She's always wanted to learn how to cook. Something inside me snapped. I lunged for the book, but Steve was quicker. He tossed it into his car and slammed the door shut. You can't do this, I said, my voice breaking. That's my family history, Steve. It's all I have left of my grandmother. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I used to love in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. You should have thought of that before you turned the kids against me, he said, getting into his car. As he drove away, I sank to my knees on the driveway, I feeling utterly defeated. How had it come to this? How had the man I'd loved for 20 years become this stranger who seemed bent on destroying me? I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to see Jessie and Josie standing there, their faces a mix of anger and concern. Mom, Jessie said softly, what are we going to do? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand. We're going to fight, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Whatever it takes, we're going to fight. As we walked back into the house, I knew we were facing our toughest battle yet. But looking at my children, I also knew I had no choice but to win. For their sake and for mine. The phone rang, piercing the quiet of the kitchen. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. Steve, hello, I answered, my voice wary. Laura, we need to talk, Steve said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. Can we meet? My heart raced. After weeks of bitter legal battles and emotional turmoil, what could he possibly want? I don't think that's a good idea, Steve, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Please, Laura, it's important for the kids' sake. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Finally, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, the park where we used to take the kids when they were little. As I drove there, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, hurt, and a tiny, traitorous spark of hope that I couldn't quite extinguish. Steve was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. As I approached, he stood up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. Laura, he said, his voice cracking. Thank you for coming. I sat down, maintaining a safe distance between us. What do you want, Steve? He took a deep breath. I've made a terrible mistake. I want to come home. I want us to be a family again. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? Claudia and I, it's over, he continued. It was never real. You and the kids, you're my real family. I was a fool to throw that away. I stared at him, speechless. Part of me wanted to laugh hysterically, while another part wanted to scream. Steve, I finally managed, you can't be serious. After everything you've done, everything you've put us through, you think you can just come back? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I know I've hurt you, Laura. I know I've hurt the kids, but I want to make it right. I'll do anything. Therapy, whatever it takes. I stood up, needing to put physical distance between us. And what about the custody battle? The house? My recipe book? Steve had the grace to look ashamed. I'll drop everything, the lawyers, the custody fight, all of it. I just want my family back. For a moment, I let myself imagine it, going back to our old life, pretending none of this had happened. But then I remembered the pain in Josie's eyes, the anger in Jessie's voice, the nights I'd spent crying myself to sleep. No, I said, my voice firm. No, Steve, we can't go back. You destroyed that the moment you chose Claudia over us. His face crumpled. Laura, please, I love you. I love our children. If you loved us, I said, feeling a strange calm wash over me, you wouldn't have betrayed us in the first place. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessie. Mom, where are you? The bakery called. They need you ASAP or you'll lose your job. Reality came crashing back. I had responsibilities, a life I'd built without Steve. I couldn't throw that away on a whim. I have to go, I said, turning away. Steve grabbed my arm. Laura, wait. Don't do this. Don't throw away 20 years of marriage. I yanked my arm free, fury rising in me. I didn't throw it away, Steve. You did, and now you have to live with the consequences. As I walked away, Steve called after me, his voice desperate. What about the kids? Don't they deserve a chance to have their family back? I stopped, turning to face him one last time. Our kids deserve parents who respect themselves and each other. They deserve stability and love, not broken promises and shattered trust. With that, I got in my car and drove away, leaving Steve standing alone in the park where we'd once been happy. As I raced to the bakery, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Had I made the right choice? Was I denying my children a chance at having their father back? But then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the resilience I'd seen in Jesse and Josie. We'd been through hell, but we'd survived. We'd built a new life, a stronger family unit. I pulled into the bakery parking lot, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: we would face them together, without Steve. Our family might be smaller now, but it was unbreakable. As I walked into the bakery, ready to fight for my job and our future, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in months, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision. The day of Jesse's college graduation dawned bright and clear. As I stood in the kitchen preparing a special breakfast, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. The doorbell rang and my heart skipped a beat. I knew who it was. "I'll get it," Jesse called from the living room. I heard muffled voices, then Jesse appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face a mix of emotions. "Mom, Dad's here. He wants to talk to all of us." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Okay, let's hear what he has to say. We gathered in the living room, Josie perched on the arm of my chair, Jesse standing protectively nearby. Steve sat across from us, looking uncomfortable in his suit. "I know I have no right to be here," Steve began, his voice shaky, "but I couldn't miss Jesse's graduation. And I wanted to apologize to all of you." I felt Josie stiffen beside me while Jesse's face remained impassive. Steve continued, "I've been selfish and stupid. I threw away the best thing in my life for nothing. Claudia left me. My parents barely speak to me. I've lost everything." "That's not our problem, Dad," Jesse said, his voice cold. "You made your choices." Steve nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I'll regret those choices for the rest of my life. But I was hoping maybe we could start over? Be a family again?" I felt a surge of anger, remembering all the pain we'd endured. But before I could speak, Josie stood up. "A family," she said, her voice trembling. "We are a family, Dad. Mom, Jesse, and me. We've been there for each other through everything. Where were you?" Steve looked stricken. "Josie, No," she interrupted. "You don't get to walk back in here and pretend nothing happened. Do you have any idea what Mom's been through? How hard she's worked to keep us together?" I reached for Josie's hand, squeezing it gently. "It's okay, sweetie." But Jesse stepped forward, his face set. "No, Mom. Josie's right. Dad needs to hear this." He turned to Steve, his voice steady. "Mom's been working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She's been to every school event, every doctor's appointment, everything. She even learned to make Grandma's beef stew from memory when you took her recipe book." I felt tears prick my eyes at the memory of that small victory. Steve looked at me, his face a mask of shame. "Laura, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved, but then I remembered all we'd been through, all we'd overcome. "I appreciate your apology, Steve," I said, my voice calm, "but we can't go back. We've moved forward and we're stronger for it." Steve nodded, defeat etched in every line of his face. "I understand. I hope someday you can forgive me." As he stood to leave, Jesse spoke up. "Dad, I still want you at my graduation, but not as my father. As a guest who's watching from afar, seeing what he lost." Steve's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "Thank you, Jesse. That's more than I deserve." After he left, we sat in silence for a moment. Then Josie turned to me, her eyes shining. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. Of us." Jesse nodded, pulling us both into a hug. "We made it, didn't we?" I held my children close, feeling a wave of love and pride wash over me. Yes, we did, and we'll keep making it, every single day. Later, as we sat in the auditorium watching Jesse receive his diploma, I caught sight of Steve sitting several rows back. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw regret and longing in his gaze, but I felt no answering pull in my heart. Instead, I turned back to Josie, squeezing her hand as we cheered for Jesse. This was our family now, smaller perhaps, but stronger and more resilient than ever. As Jesse joined us after the ceremony, his face beaming with pride, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. We had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. "So," Jesse said, grinning at us, "who's ready for some celebratory beef stew?" Josie and I laughed, linking arms with him as we headed out into the bright sunshine. Our future stretched before us, full of promise and hope. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that we were going to be just fine.
Hi, I'm Anna. I've been with Rob for quite a while now. We met in college, got married soon after, and have been together for 15 years. Life with Rob was generally peaceful. We lived in a decent house, had good jobs, and shared a bunch of common interests. But there was always something missing, a child. You see, we tried for years to get pregnant. We visited doctors, tried different treatments, and even considered adoption. But nothing worked. As time went on, the strain of our childless reality began to pull at our once strong bond. Arguments became frequent, and the future started to look a bit gloomy. But then one day, something changed. It was a regular Wednesday morning. I woke up feeling a little queasy. Thinking it was something I ate, I brushed it off. But then I remembered. I had missed my period. Could it be? I quickly rummaged through the bathroom cupboard and found a leftover pregnancy test from years ago. Without wasting a moment, I used it, waiting for the result. The result felt like the longest 3 minutes of my life. When I finally dared to look, it was positive. My heart raced. We were pregnant. The joy, the excitement, the fear, it all rushed in. I had to tell Rob. He was in the living room, engrossed in some paperwork. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to him, the test still in my hand. "Rob," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm pregnant." He looked up, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "Are you sure? I mean, at this age, is it even safe?" I was taken aback. This wasn't the reaction I was expecting. "I took the test, Rob. It's positive," I said, trying to reassure him. He sighed. "Anna, you know how hard it's been. And now, at 37, do you know the risks?" I felt a sting of hurt. "I thought you'd be happy," I whispered. "I am. I'm worried about you, about us," he replied, his voice softening a bit. "We've waited so long for this, Rob. We can't let fear dictate our happiness now," I countered. He looked down, avoiding my gaze. "Have you considered maybe not going through with it?" he asked. I couldn't believe my ears. "Terminate the pregnancy?" "No, Rob. This might be our only chance." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our situation pressing down on both of us. I wanted him to be as overjoyed as I was, but at that moment, all I saw in his eyes was fear and uncertainty. That night, as we lay side by side in bed, I held on to hope. Hope that our child would bring us closer again. Hope that our love was strong enough to overcome any challenge, and above all, hope for the future. The next few months were tough. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that this pregnancy wasn't going to be easy. I was often sick, nauseated, and felt exhausted all the time. But each little kick from inside reminded me why it was all worth it. One day, after feeling particularly weak, I collapsed. Thankfully, Rob was home and immediately rushed me to the hospital. As I lay on the cold hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines, I felt more vulnerable than ever before. "Is she going to be okay?" I heard Rob ask Dr. Mitchell, his voice laced with worry. "She needs rest," Dr. Mitchell replied. "Her body is under a lot of strain due to the pregnancy. It's imperative that she stays relaxed and avoids any stress." That hospital stay was the first of many. Each time I was admitted, I'd watch Rob from the window, pacing back and forth in the hospital corridor, talking on the phone, sometimes even arguing with the billing department. One evening, as I lay in the hospital bed, Rob walked in with a weary look on his face. He looked like he hadn't slept for days. I met with Dr. Mitchell. He began. He said we need to consider the possibility of bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. I nodded slowly. If it's best for the baby, I'll do it. Rob sat down next to me, holding my hand. I'm sorry, Anna. I wish I could do more to help. I squeezed his hand. You're here with me, that's more than enough. However, as the days went by, Rob's visits became less frequent. Sometimes he'd call, other times he'd send a text saying he was caught up with work. But the distance between us seemed to be growing. During one of my longer hospital stays, feeling particularly low and missing the comfort of my home, I asked a nurse if I could use the phone to call Rob. It's been 3 days, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. When he answered, You haven't visited. I know, Anna. It's hard for me seeing you like this, he admitted. Rob, I need you now more than ever, I pleaded. Silence. I'll try to come by tomorrow, he finally said, his voice distant. But tomorrow turned into the day after, and soon a week had passed. Feeling isolated and alone, I confided in my nurse, Lisa. He's probably just scared, she suggested, trying to be comforting. Sometimes when people can't handle situations, they distance themselves. One morning, after a particularly difficult night, Dr. Mitchell came into my room. I think it's time we discuss the birth plan, Anna, he began cautiously. There are some decisions to be made. Rob, despite his absences, was there for that discussion. We sat hand in hand, listening to our options, praying for the strength to make the right choices. Days turned into weeks, and as the date approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. But I held on to hope, believing that once our child arrived, everything would fall into place. Little did I know, the hardest part of our journey was yet to come. The first moments of holding my daughter Emma in my arms were moments of pure bliss. Her tiny fingers, her soft cooing sounds, it felt like a dream. But that dream was quickly shattered by Dr. Mitchell's grim announcement. Anna, Rob, he began with a heavy sigh, there are some concerns regarding Emma's health. That evening, as I cradled Emma, Rob walked into the room, a storm brewing in his eyes. Anna, he started, his voice shaking. How could you? Giving birth at this age, we knew the risks. Tears welled up in my eyes. Rob, I thought we wanted this. I thought we wanted a family. He was nearly shouting now. You should have considered an abortion. Why bring a child into the world with so many complications because of your selfishness? I was shocked. Rob, she's our daughter. We should be together in this, not pointing fingers. His face was red with anger. I can't believe I'm in this situation. I can't raise a child with potential disabilities. It's not the life I imagined. As the weight of his words sank in, a cold dread filled my heart. So what are you saying, Rob? He hesitated for a moment. I don't think I can do this. I can't be here, not like this. It felt like the floor had been pulled from beneath me. You're abandoning your daughter because she might be different? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I just can't handle it, Anna. Devastation turned into determination. Fine. If you're leaving, then leave for good. But you'll have no claim over Emma. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me with our newborn daughter, grappling with the uncertainty of our future. The first few weeks after Rob left were the hardest. The house felt empty, but the silence was deafening, and the reality of being a single mother weighed heavily on me. But every time I looked into Emma's big, innocent eyes, I felt a surge of determination. I was going to make sure she had the best life possible, no matter what it took. My sister Linda was a godsend during this time. She came over often, helping with household chores and looking after Emma so I could rest. One evening, as I was feeding Emma, Linda walked in holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Anna," she began gently, "you need to think about the future. Have you considered finding a place of your own?" I sighed, looking around the home that held so many memories. "I've thought about it, but the thought of leaving this place, it's just hard." Linda took my hand. "I know. But think about Emma. This house will always remind you of Rob and everything that happened. You both deserve a fresh start." She was right. I needed to let go of the past and focus on building a new life for Emma and me. The search for a new place wasn't easy with my limited savings and no job. Options were limited. But then one day, Linda called me excitedly. "Anna, you won't believe what I found. There's a small house for rent in my neighborhood. It's perfect for you and Emma." I went to see the house the very next day. It was a cozy 2-bedroom place with a small garden in the back. The landlord, Mrs. Peterson, was a kind elderly lady who lived next door. "Linda speaks very highly of you," Mrs. Peterson said, smiling warmly. "The place is yours if you want it." I felt tears of gratitude welling up. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. This means so much to me." Moving in was hectic, but with Linda's help, we managed. As I set up Emma's room, filling it with toys and her tiny clothes, a sense of peace washed over me. This was our home, our sanctuary. Linda popped her head into the room. "How's it going in here?" I smiled, hugging Emma close. "It's perfect. I can't thank you enough." She hugged us both. "That's what family is for. You're not alone in this, Anna. Remember that." Days turned into weeks, and life began to settle into a new routine. Morning walks with Emma, visits to the local park, and coffee dates with Linda became our new normal. One day, as Emma and I were playing in the garden, Mrs. Peterson walked over, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies. "Thought you two could use a treat," she said, smiling. I smiled back, taking a cookie. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. It's delicious." She chuckled. "Call me Ellie. Feels strange being called Mrs. Peterson by my new neighbor." We chatted as Emma giggled and played. Ellie shared stories of her own children, offering advice and wisdom. I felt a connection, a sense of community that had been missing for so long. As the days went by, the pain of the past began to fade. With the support of my sister and new friends like Ellie, I realized that while one chapter of my life had closed, another, even more beautiful one, was just beginning. Emma's first birthday was just around the corner, and I was deep in preparations. Ellie and Linda offered their assistance, suggesting ideas for decorations and games. As the day drew nearer, I found myself reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. My baby girl, Emma, was blossoming into a bubbly, inquisitive child, her laughter a constant source of joy. One afternoon, as I was laying Emma down for her nap, the phone rang. The sound was sharp and unexpected. "Hello? Hello, Anna?" came the familiar voice. It was Dr. Mitchell. I felt a twinge of anxiety. "Dr. Mitchell, is there a problem?" He hesitated, which only deepened my concern. "Anna, I need you to come to the hospital. There's something about Emma we need to discuss." I felt my heart in my throat. "Is she okay?" His voice was thick with regret. "Please come in. We need to talk face to face." Linda agreed to watch Emma while I rushed to the hospital. The drive felt much longer than it was, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Dr. Mitchell greeted me in his office, his usually calm face lined with worry. "Anna, I'm so sorry to call you in this way." My patience was thinning. What's going on? Taking a deep breath, he began. There's been a grave error. The initial test we ran on Emma after her birth got mixed up with another baby's. My confusion grew. Meaning? He met my gaze, his eyes filled with regret. Emma is healthy, Anna. She doesn't have any medical condition. I couldn't express how deeply sorry I am. The weight of his words hit me hard. You mean to tell me I've lived this past year under false assumptions? My life turned upside down because of this? His voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, and it's my responsibility. I can't begin to fathom the pain this has caused. I thought of Rob, of the bitterness and pain this mistake had caused. It's shattered my life. Dr. Mitchell looked defeated. I know words can't change the past, but I'll do everything I can to make it right. I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I need time to process this. Driving home, a mix of relief and fury consumed me. Yet, seeing Emma's joyful face as I walked in grounded me. She was my world, and she was okay. That night, Linda and I sat down, and I relayed everything. She was horrified. Anna, what are you going to do? I looked at Emma, peacefully sleeping. For now, nothing, and I don't want Rob to know. He made his choice. Linda squeezed my hand. You're strong, Anna. Remember, you're not alone in this. In the stillness of the night, I reflected on our journey. Yes, the revelation about Emma's health was bittersweet, but one thing was for sure. I would protect and cherish her regardless of the past. The swift passage of time amazed me. Before I knew it, Emma was already 5 and gearing up for her first day of school. My feelings were a whirlwind of pride, hope, and the natural apprehension of a mother. At breakfast a few days before school, Emma gazed at me, her eyes shimmering with anticipation. Mom, will I be going to school like other kids? I smiled warmly. Yes, sweetie, in just a few days you'll be starting. Her face lit up. Will I find friends there? Will they like me? Touched by her innocence, I assured her. Emma, you're such a lovely girl. Of course they'll adore you. On her first day, dressed in her new school uniform with a pink backpack hanging from her shoulders, Emma paused at the school gates. With a quiver in her voice, she admitted, Mommy, I'm scared. No one will talk to me. I crouched to her eye level. Honey, always remember to be yourself. You're amazing and they'll see that. Just give it some time. Her small hand waved goodbye as she joined the bustling crowd of students. I watched her until she was out of sight, my heart heavy with the typical worries of a parent. A few weeks later, Emma was all excitement and stories about her new friend, Sophia. Their adventures during breaks, their shared love for painting, and their little secrets. One day she bounced home asking, Mom, can Sophia come over tomorrow? Delighted at her blossoming friendship, I agreed. Absolutely. I'm eager to meet your new buddy. The next afternoon was filled with their giggles and playful shouts. From the corner of my eye, I noticed their genuine bond and thought of how childhood friendships were so pure and uncomplicated. As the sun dipped, a car pulled up. Emma, holding Sophia's hand, led her to the door. To my shock, standing there were Rob and a young woman, presumably his new wife. Emma, inside now, Rob's voice was curt. Sophia, sensing the tension, looked worriedly between her parents and me. Daddy, I had so much fun. Emma's my best friend. Rob's gaze was cold. Sophia, we've talked about this. You shouldn't play with inferior children. His voice dripped with disdain, making it clear whom he referred to. I felt a rush of anger. Before I could retort, the young woman, probably trying to mediate, gently tugged at Sophia's hand. Come, dear, let's go home. Emma stood close to me, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt as the car drove away. "Mom, why did he say that?" Holding her close, I replied, "Sometimes, sweetie, people don't say the nicest things. But always remember, you're wonderful just the way you are." That evening, as I tucked Emma in, I promised myself that no matter what, I'd always protect her from the cruel judgments of the world. Only days after the incident, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, soft yet firm, responded. "Hi, this is Emily, Sophia's mother. Can we talk?" Surprised, I replied cautiously, "Of course. What's on your mind?" She hesitated. "I'd rather discuss this face to face. Can we meet tomorrow? There's a cafe around the corner from your house." After a moment, I agreed. "All right, see you at 10 a.m. The next morning, I saw Emily waiting. She looked out of place, her pristine appearance contrasting with the laid-back vibe of the cafe. As I approached, she stood up, offering a polite if slightly forced smile. "Thank you for coming," she began, her eyes searching mine. After the other day, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling that there's more to the story than Rob's told me. I took a deep breath. I'm not one to spread tales, but since Sophia is involved, I think you should know. She leaned forward, anticipation evident. "Please tell me everything." Over the next hour, I unfolded our past, how Rob and I had struggled with fertility, my unexpected pregnancy, his disinterest, the misdiagnosis, his leaving, and my subsequent journey with Emma. I made sure to be factual, not letting emotion color the narrative. Emily sat stunned. "He never told me any of this. He said you were the one who left him, and he always painted such a rosy picture of your marriage." I shrugged. "Sometimes people craft stories to cope or to hide." She looked defeated. "I feel like such a fool. I thought our love was genuine, but now it seems like he was just replacing one life with another." "Emily," I started, my tone firm, "it's not about him anymore. It's about Sophia and Emma. They formed a bond. I don't want Emma to suffer because of our past." She nodded. "I completely agree. Children shouldn't be dragged into adult disputes." As we parted, I felt a weight lifted. For the first time, I felt like I was truly free from Rob's shadow. Having laid our past bare that evening as Emma played with her toys, she looked up. "Mom, will I see Sophia again?" Smiling, I said, "Yes, sweetie, you will. And always remember, your past doesn't define your future. You do." My phone buzzed on the coffee table, startling me from my thoughts. Rob's name flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't expected to see in a long time. Hesitating for only a moment, I answered. "Anna." Rob's voice was filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I frowned, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" His voice grew softer, almost pleading. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Emily left me, she filed for divorce, and she's taken everything. Everything. I've lost almost everything, Anna, and it's all because she spoke to you." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Rob, you made your choices." I just told her the truth. There was a heavy pause. "She also told me about Emma, that she's healthy. You never told me. Why would I? After everything you said, after everything you didn't deserve to know," I retorted. Rob's voice grew desperate. "Anna, I made a mistake. I realize that now. I want to be there for Emma. I want to be there for you. We can be a family again." I scoffed in disbelief. "Now that your life's in shambles, you suddenly want us back? You're unbelievable, Rob." "Anna, I know I messed up, but I've changed. Please give me a chance. I could feel anger rising in me. You walked out on us, Rob. You called our daughter inferior and turned your back. Now that your little fairy tale with Emily has ended, you think you can just waltz back into our lives? Think again. He sounded desperate. Anna, I was wrong. I see that now. Can't you give me another chance? No, I replied firmly. Emma and I have moved on. We're doing just fine without you, and we don't need or want you in our lives. But Anna, it's over, Rob. Goodbye. I ended the call, my heart racing. I took a deep breath, letting the emotions wash over me. Emma and I had each other, and that was all that mattered. I wouldn't let Rob's selfishness disrupt our peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together.
I'm going to remarry my 18-year-old girlfriend. You're in the way, so disappear. What? So, you want a divorce, is that it? Exactly. What is that? Don't joke about things like that. You guys have always treated me carelessly, haven't you? It's too late to get flustered after I've brought up divorce. What? I'm not flustered at all. I'm actually mad that you brought up divorce to Mom first. Don't raise your voice so much. How can you stay so calm? I'm angry too. Got it. Shall we get divorced then? Oh, you'll grant me a divorce? That makes things easier. What? Mom? Is that okay? After years of juggling child-rearing, shuttling kids to extracurricular activities, and caring for my father-in-law, my husband suddenly proposed a divorce. When I casually agreed to the divorce and mentioned it too lightly, my eldest daughter shouted in surprise. Ethan was alone, celebrating with a fist pump. My eldest daughter seemed not to understand my words, but this is fine. If everything goes as I expect, everything should resolve smoothly. In reality, a month after I blocked his calls, my ex-husband came to our house. I am a 37-year-old part-time worker. I married Ethan, who is 2 years older than me, when I was 24 due to a shotgun wedding, and we were blessed with 2 children after the marriage. Our daughter Kristen, who turns 13 this year, has started middle school, and our son Ted has turned 6 and started elementary school. With the children reaching middle and elementary school ages, childcare should have become a bit easier, but the birth of our second son, Sean, 2 years ago has kept us in a constant state of busyness. However, I have strong support, so I can manage household chores, childcare, and work. Ted. You need your gym bag today, right? Prepare it yourself. I'll prepare it after breakfast. That's what you said last week, but you forgot it, didn't you? Prepare it first. Seeing me always busy, my eldest daughter naturally started to support me. She is already showing the temperament of a tough mother, even more maternal than I am. I rely on my eldest daughter's help with childcare, which honestly helps a lot. However, I also feel pathetic having to rely on a child for help with childcare. Still, I depend on my eldest daughter because I am also caring for George, my father-in-law. Megan, I'm sorry, but I need to go to the toilet. Can you take me? Understood. Let's get up slowly then. I'm always sorry about this. My father-in-law always looks apologetic towards me. However, I have never considered him a burden. Though he requires care, he is only weak in the legs and can manage daily activities with some support. Thus, it's more about support than care, really. George is 70, and my mother-in-law Dorothy is 68. Since my mother-in-law alone can't fully support him, our family has been living with my in-laws for about 3 years now. Living with my in-laws is often fraught with trouble, but fortunately, it hasn't involved me much. Welcome home, thanks for the hard work, Bert. Lunch is ready, you'll eat, right? Thank you. I appreciate it, as always. We're the ones being helped here, don't worry about it. Oh, by the way, I fixed a button on Ted's uniform that had come off. I did it without asking, I hope that was okay? You fixed it? That's very helpful, thank you. My mother-in-law supports us with housework and childcare. Also, my father-in-law entertains my eldest son when he returns from school. When I was pregnant with my second son, they helped me a lot. Though we came to my in-laws to support them, it feels like the roles have completely reversed. Therefore, I feel indebted to my in-laws, but they always say not to worry about it. I'm always causing trouble, I know. Living with your husband's parents must be tough, but you accepted us. I'm truly grateful. That's right. I couldn't support him alone. Besides, we're happy to live with our grandchildren. You might think we're helping you with housework and childcare, but that's not it. We do it because we enjoy it, and it brings us joy. After 3 years of living with my in-laws, I've been leading a busy yet enjoyable life. However, there is one thing I'm concerned about. In these 3 years, my husband's attitude has gradually changed. One morning, it was a usual scene. You didn't hand over the notice from yesterday, did you? I always tell you to make sure to hand it over. I just forgot yesterday. Megan. I'm sorry, but could you buy some sewing thread at the dollar store on your way back from work today? Understood. Could you also buy a new nail clipper? The one we're using now is getting dull. This ordinary scene seems to annoy my husband. You have it good, getting help with the housework and childcare. How can you say that? You don't help, so you wouldn't know, but household chores and childcare are tough. Plus, I even have to go to work. Work. It's just an easy part-time job, isn't it? What's the matter with you? Did something bad happen at work? What? Dad, are you taking it out on us? It's not like that. Some people handle housework, childcare, and work all by themselves, so I just mean don't be too spoiled. After placing his toast back on the plate, my husband left for work. I get complaints from my husband. He seems displeased that I receive help from my eldest daughter and my in-laws. However, since my eldest daughter and in-laws are on my side, my husband often retreats in a bad mood. Feeling uncomfortable without allies, he has started to reduce his time at home. Welcome home. You're late again today. What about dinner? I don't need it. I'm just going to take a shower and go to sleep. My husband comes home late and has started to go out alone on weekends. He sulks because he doesn't have the family's support, although it's his own attitude that causes this, making it feel like a fourth child has emerged. But my husband is almost 40, an adult, and a father. I can't deal with him sulking like a child forever. Hey, even if you don't help with the housework, could you at least help a little with the childcare? Ask your mom and them for that. Kristen has started going to cram school, right? I have to pick her up because she gets home late. And Ted has joined a soccer club, hasn't he? Sometimes on weekends, I have to take him a bit far for practice games. I can't really ask your mother to do the driving, can I? I'm not doing any driving around. Why should I have to drive the kids around at night or on weekends when I'm tired from work? You have a part-time job and you can drive, so you should do it. If I take the kids to and from their activities, I won't be able to do anything at home. I'll have to rely even more on your parents. I understand you're tired from work, but please, help a little. You said you'd help when the kids started their activities, didn't you? I said I'd pay for it. If you can't drive them, then make them quit their activities. My husband's dissatisfaction is directed not only at me, but also at the children who don't take his side. It seems the biggest child of all requires the most attention. Since I can't make the children quit their activities, I decided to handle their transportation myself. But I can't rely on my in-laws any more than I already do. So, I try to keep from adding to their burden as much as possible. However, the driving, taking 1 to 2 hours each time, inevitably cuts into the efficiency of my housework and childcare. To make up for the lost efficiency, I've started waking up early and cutting back on sleep to get housework and childcare done. I use every spare moment for housework and childcare. Exhausted from non-stop housework and childcare, I also go to my part-time job and continue to support my father-in-law. This unsustainable effort can't continue forever. Having reached my limit just on grit, I consulted my husband again, but he flatly refused, saying, "What? I told you I wouldn't do the driving." So, I continue to transport the children, hiding my fatigue. I'm home. Welcome back. Well done, Megan. Are you okay? Isn't the driving tough? I'm fine. I'll get dinner ready. I force a smile to hide my fatigue. I can't rely on my in-laws any more than I already do. I know I should openly rely on my in-laws, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Unfortunately, bad things seem to happen one after another. My father-in-law suddenly passed away from acute myocardial infarction. At the hospital, my daughter, my mother-in-law, and I cried as we looked at my father-in-law, who had passed away in his sleep. My son was teary-eyed and looked down in silence. It's understandable that 2-year-old Sean doesn't grasp the situation and looks confused. However, why is my husband grinning? Well, Dad was over 70, so it can't be helped, right? No more needing to help with the toilet or the bath. Let's try to think positively. My husband is not the kind of person who makes jokes to cheer us up. He probably means what he said. Even if it were a joke, it would be in extremely poor taste. But right now, sadness overwhelmingly outweighs anger. So, we ignored my husband and mourned the loss of my father-in-law. We better get started on the funeral arrangements. Our reaction probably wasn't what he had hoped for. He left the hospital room with a dismissive remark, increasing the emotional distance between us and him. I'll be late again today, so I don't need dinner. 2 years after my father-in-law's death, my husband continues to do as he pleases, still not helping with housework or childcare, and I'm still doing the driving for our 2 children and now also for Sean to kindergarten. Moreover, he comes home later than before, sometimes doesn't return on weekends, and has become even more reckless with money. Hey! Did you use the household money again? So what? Most of that money is what I earned, isn't it? We have 3 kids, you know? We still need a lot of money, so stop wasting it. Shut up. You should just keep quiet and take care of the house. Our relationship had already cooled off. But we haven't divorced yet, partly because of the children, but also because I'm worried about my mother-in-law. I'm sorry that Ethan keeps causing trouble. You can dump him anytime, you know? My mother-in-law sometimes tells me it's okay to divorce, but if we were to divorce, my husband and mother-in-law would be left alone. I'm worried about leaving my kindly mother-in-law alone with such a husband. So, whenever she brings up divorce, I just laugh it off. What are you saying? Even if my relationship with my husband has cooled, having 3 adorable children and a kind mother-in-law is enough for me. However, the time to end such a life has come. My mother-in-law has suffered a stroke. Though her life was saved, my mother-in-law developed cognitive impairment as a result of her condition. The view from that mountain is really beautiful. I really love that view. I went there last week. Wow, really? I'd like to see that view from the mountain someday too. My eldest daughter listens to her grandmother with a smile. However, my mother-in-law did not go to the mountain last week. Due to her cognitive impairment from the stroke, she also has memory issues and talks about trips from years ago as if they happened recently. Moreover, she repeats the same story multiple times. My eldest daughter continues to listen with a smile until my mother-in-law is satisfied. Did Mom finish her meal? It took a long time today. Yeah. But she wasn't slow eating, she was just caught up in her stories. I see. That's a sign she's still energetic. We need to keep her healthy. Right. But I'm a bit worried. Earlier, she reached out her hand to a completely different place from her spoon. To keep her healthy, we need to cover for her like that. I was worried whether I could provide enough support when my mother-in-law fell, but my eldest daughter helps with the caregiving and the household chores, so we're managing. Seeing how my daughter supports me, my eldest son has also started to take care of his younger brother. I've come to realize that this is what it means to support each other as a family. It's just unfortunate that my husband's cooperation isn't part of this. Why doesn't that guy help with anything around the house? Even Ted is looking after Sean. Don't call your father that guy. Father? Can someone like him even be called a father? It's no wonder my eldest daughter is exasperated with her husband. Well, I think it's much better than being bothered by him. My husband still comes home late and goes out on weekends. It's a problem that he spends money, but I'm not interested in what he does outside. So, it's better for me if he just stays uninvolved. Thinking this, I had been ignoring my husband, but about 6 months after my mother-in-law's fall, my husband dropped a huge bombshell on our family. I'm going to remarry my 18-year-old girlfriend. You're in the way, so disappear. What? My husband, returning home after the kids had gone to bed, suddenly confronted me with a divorce. I was speechless, my mind went blank. Though I've been managing household chores, childcare, and work with some help since coming to live with my in-laws. I also took care of my father-in-law, and now I'm caring for my mother-in-law. Do I really have to be confronted with a divorce from a husband who hasn't helped with the house or his parents at all? And to remarry an 18-year-old? No matter how hard I try, I can't understand what my husband is saying. So, you want a divorce, is that it? Exactly. What is that? Don't joke about things like that. I thought she was asleep, but my eldest daughter had been awake. She couldn't stand our conversation and burst in. You guys have always treated me carelessly, haven't you? It's too late to get flustered after I've brought up divorce. What? I'm not flustered at all. I'm actually mad that you brought up divorce to Mom first. My eldest daughter's anger was so strong, I couldn't even talk to my husband. It's nice that she's angry for me, but this could wake up my sons. Kristen, don't raise your voice so much. How can you stay so calm? I'm angry too. First, let your father and I talk, so go back to your room. No. I'm staying here. It seemed my eldest daughter had no intention of leaving the room. She quieted down but crossed her arms and continued to glare at her father without moving. It's not ideal to discuss divorce in front of the kids, but it can't be helped. So, you've been coming home late and going out on weekends for that girlfriend, huh? Yes. We've been together for about a year now. She's a girl who works part-time at my regular pub. Unlike you, she's friendly and kind. That should be called an affair, not a relationship, but that's not the point I want to emphasize. She's still 18, right? Are her parents okay with this? Her parents are strongly opposed. If she marries me, they're going to disown her. How can you marry without her parents' consent? We don't need her parents' consent. We can get married. That's why we've been patiently dating this past year. It's not about the law, but about human connections and decency. I was at a loss, unable to understand my husband. Looking at my daughter's face, she had an expression of complete disbelief. So, her parents don't agree, but you've confirmed her feelings, right? Yes, of course. We love each other. I didn't need to hear that. I don't want her to say too much in front of my daughter. At this point, I don't care about the divorce or the affair. What worries me is my mother-in-law after the divorce. I looked at a photo of my mother-in-law on a shelf in the corner of the room. It was taken when she was healthy, smiling on a mountain hike. Looking at my mother-in-law's smiling face, I remembered she had always said I could leave my husband anytime. Understood. So, shall we get divorced? Oh, you'll grant me a divorce? That makes things easier. What? Mom? Is that okay? My casual agreement to the divorce and my light mention of it shocked my eldest daughter. Ethan was alone, celebrating with a fist pump. I can't accept this. This is fine. What's fine? This is fine. I repeated the same words, trying to communicate with my eyes to my eldest daughter that I wasn't just accepting the divorce. It seemed my feelings had reached her, who had been with me as family. However, my husband, who hadn't been part of us as a family, failed to notice the silent conversation between my daughter and me. If everything goes as I expect, everything should work out smoothly. The decision to divorce is made, but there are children involved, and we need to discuss the details. Therefore, I cannot leave the house immediately. Of course, it's okay for me to take the children, right? Obviously. Better take them away. They're just a nuisance. Understood. But it's impossible to just take the children and leave immediately, so wait a bit. Then, you can stay here until you find a place to move. I'll be spending time with my girlfriend. But get out in 2 weeks. I can't have you sticking around forever. As my husband left the house happily, my eldest daughter looked at me anxiously. It's okay. Do you think a person like that can be happy? Surely, your grandfather in heaven will punish him. I tried to alleviate my daughter's anxiety with a smile. Seeing me smile, she too smiled back, reassured. The next day, I reported the divorce to my mother-in-law. Mother, I'm sorry. I've decided to get a divorce. It's okay. I'm sorry for all the trouble up to now. Though the conversation went on, my mother-in-law probably didn't fully grasp its meaning. Yet, her words were comforting to me. 2 weeks later, I left the house with my 3 children. The place we moved to wasn't far from my in-laws. This was to avoid changing the children's schools and to continue my part-time job, but there was another reason as well. The divorce proceeded smoothly as I didn't press the issue of the affair. I thought it more important to quickly sever ties with my husband and ensure a smooth transition to receiving child support, rather than arguing about compensation. However, in return for not fussing about the affair, I took most of our savings and the car. My ex-husband, eager to start his life with his 18-year-old new wife, accepted these terms without fully understanding how much it would cost him later. Mom, you think about 2 months? I think about 1 month. You think he lacks that much persistence? Surely he can last about 2 months, right? I explained to my daughter why I divorced her father so easily. Satisfied with my explanation, she looked forward to that time. A month after the divorce, my ex-husband called my smartphone. See, just about a month. Not yet. I don't think he's been pushed to his limit yet. Let's wait and see. After that, my ex-husband started bombarding me with calls. At night, he would call every 10 minutes. It became impossible to relax at home, so I blocked his number. Since I had told him where we lived, there wouldn't be a problem if he couldn't reach me by phone. When he was driven to his limit, he would surely come to the house. A month after blocking him, my ex-husband finally showed up at our house. Please. Come back. I was wrong. Through the intercom, my husband pleaded loudly for help. It was night, and to avoid bad rumors in the neighborhood, I reluctantly let him into the house to talk. I sent the younger son to another room with the eldest, and I listened to my ex-husband's story with my daughter. Well, it was probably just as I had expected. I have an idea of what happened, but could you explain it anyway? After you guys left, I started living with my remarriage partner and my mom, just the 3 of us at her home. But the new wife couldn't handle taking care of mom and gave up, right? Yes. I didn't think she'd give up so easily, even middle schooler Kristen could do it. You know. It's obvious, isn't it? Taking care of parents isn't about persistence. Kristen could take care of mom because we've always lived as a family. I could take care of your parents because they were kind to me and felt like my real parents. Did you really think that just getting married and saying, "This is your mother-in-law, take care of her," would work? That is. You probably pushed all the housework onto her too, right? Anyone would hate that. Especially an 18-year-old. So? Did you divorce her already? No, we hadn't registered the marriage yet, we were planning to on our anniversary. Lucky for her, then. She dumped you easily, huh? I've been there, and I know that young women can find older men attractive. I bet the 18-year-old new wife was serious about marrying my ex-husband. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fought her parents' opposition and moved in with my in-laws. She must have been informed about my mother-in-law beforehand. However, the reality of married life and caregiving must have been much harder than she imagined. For an 18-year-old with little life experience, it would be tough to overcome such trials. If they were to make their married life successful, my ex-husband's support would have been crucial, but he helped with nothing. Moreover, it's dubious whether he even explained the situation adequately or prepared her appropriately. But she cut ties with her parents to marry you, right? How are you planning to take responsibility? Her parents said they'd cut ties, but they didn't in the end. Now she's being sheltered by them. Sheltered? What do you mean? Did you? Of course, I went after her when she left the house. But her parents said, "Our daughter is scared, so don't come anymore." This is a marital issue. It's natural for us to discuss it together. Yet, they say if I persist, they'll consult a lawyer. A 40-year-old man pressuring an 18-year-old girl is scary enough. If a daughter runs back home from a man, it's natural for parents to protect her. Moreover, the mention of a lawyer instead of the police shows how serious her parents are. The police cannot act without evidence of harm, but involving a lawyer might make it easier for them to intervene, and even if the police do not act, a civil lawsuit might be possible. Moreover, although people may speak of cutting ties, family bonds are not so easily severed. I cannot imagine ever cutting ties with my children, no matter what they do. However, my ex-husband seems to be someone who can imagine cutting ties with his children. I don't care about you and your new wife anymore. But you came here alone, is Grandma okay? Mom's already asleep, so she's fine. I've also installed a monitoring camera. Grandma is alone at home? I can't believe it. Give me the keys now. My eldest daughter snatched the keys from my ex-husband and rushed to our mother-in-law's place without stopping. What are you thinking? I'm at my limit. Whatever I do, you ask about Megan? About Kristen? About Ted and Sean? Suddenly she starts saying things that make no sense. My wife ran away, and I can't take care of Mom alone anymore. Please, come back. The reason Mom doesn't rely on you and calls our names instead, is it because you couldn't be the family she needed? Being related by blood doesn't make you family. If you were really family, you'd understand what Mom wants to say. Kristen and I have never thought Mom was saying nonsense. Realizing how foolish his actions had been, my ex-husband hung his head and fell silent. If my ex-husband has come to regret his past actions, that's an ideal turn of events for me. I handed him a brochure I had prepared. I have no intention of remarrying you. But you can't take care of Mom, can you? How about we get her into a care facility? I suggested to my ex-husband that we place our mother-in-law in a nearby care facility. It would be much safer for her to be there than with my incapable ex-husband. Additionally, visiting her at the facility would allow us to see her without having to meet my ex-husband. The brochure I handed to my ex-husband was for a facility near our house. We hadn't moved too far away after leaving the marital home, partly for this reason. Okay. I'll do that. With this, I achieved my goal. I managed to divorce and ensure that my children and I could see my mother-in-law whenever we wanted. Shall we head to your house then? What does that mean? My ex-husband, mistakenly thinking that his remorse and regret had moved me, hoped for a positive response. Don't misunderstand. I'm going to pick up Kristen. She rushed out suddenly earlier, and since it's night, even if it's close by, it's natural for me to go pick up our child, right? Realizing he had been mistaken, my ex-husband's shoulders fell. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. It had been 2 months since we last visited the family home, but I didn't meet with my mother-in-law. I simply picked up my eldest daughter and returned home. We can meet with my mother-in-law anytime now, so hearing from my daughter was enough for now. Grandma said she went to the mountain yesterday too. She's still so lively, huh? It's not fair that only sister gets to see Grandma. I wanted to see Grandma too. It's late now, so be patient. We'll be able to see Grandma from now on. It looks like your plan worked, didn't it? Yes, this way I managed to separate that man from Grandma. As I drove home, thinking about being able to meet Grandma again made me happy, and I found myself humming a tune. Later, my mother-in-law was admitted to the care facility. Mother, how are you feeling? Any changes? Yes, I've been feeling quite well recently. According to the staff at the facility, my mother-in-law had been somber and quiet right after admission. However, as my children and I began visiting, her mood lightened and she started talking more. With my mother-in-law in the facility, my ex-husband was left living alone at the family home. It seems he finally gave up on the new wife after her parents threatened to consult a lawyer. I'm just relieved he didn't become a stalker. However, the girl must have been quite frightened. While I understand his desire not to lose a young wife, as an adult, he should have known when to step back. Later, I learned that around the time my ex-husband started complaining and behaving strangely, he had made a major mistake at work. It was a big enough blunder to push him into a less influential position at his company. Feeling ostracized at work while I managed home affairs smoothly with family support apparently didn't sit well with him. As he began to complain, finding no allies at home either, he ended up relying on a teenager. Being relied upon by a younger person probably made him feel validated. Such childish reasons indeed. Also, it seems that not only his wife but also his mother had forsaken him. Nice to meet you. It's a lovely day, isn't it? Despite clearly remembering us, it seems my mother-in-law has forgotten that my ex-husband is her son. His childlike behavior led to our divorce and ultimately left him truly alone. Now alone, my ex-husband's mental state worsened, and he continued to make mistakes at work. One mistake led to another, resulting in demotion and pay cuts. Given his mental state, he probably should take a break from work, but he can't afford to. Since I took most of our savings in exchange for not fussing about the affair during our divorce, he's left without much money. Still, he needs to work to pay the child support for our 3 kids and the care facility fees for my mother-in-law. Being without support is a tough situation. To support the 3 kids, I found a job. Sean is still small, but Kristen and Ted help look after him. Having real support is truly reassuring.